Welcome back to the Wyo Business Spotlight. Thank you again for joining us. Today we have in the studio Elissa Campbell. Elissa, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation. I'm excited to be here.
For those that don't know who you are, obviously in your district, because you work in Cheyenne, you're one of our legislators, the House District 56.
Correct.
So those that vote for you, they know who you are. They vote for you. In theory, they know who you are. But before we get into these questions that we'd like to talk about that are focused on business, can you give us a short little background of who you are, what you do, and how long you've been doing it?
Sure. So I've been here for a very long time. So born and raised in Wyoming, moved here for high school. So went to Kelly Walsh, go Trojans, and then Casper College, University of Wyoming, then left briefly and came back 21 years ago. So I've been back in Casper 21 years and have been self-employed, owned my own business all of that time. So about 27 years.
Got it. So,
yeah.
So the pertinence of talking about how legislation affects business is something that's a reality to you, obviously.
Absolutely.
So
yeah.
So to get into it, there are nearly, and you actually brought this information to me. I wasn't aware of this, but there are nearly 40 lawsuits against the federal government from Wyoming. Mm-hmm. Is that constant battle the price to pay for state sovereignty, in your opinion?
I think that's where a lot of the rub comes from, right? By law, right, we have to be in compliance with the feds, which means their standard sets the standard for us. And in Wyoming, a lot of ours, especially when it comes to DEQ, EPA, we have higher standards. And so we push back against the feds saying, we don't want to meet your standards, we want to do better. Mm-hmm. And that's following our statutes and our guidelines. Because they tend to be, especially in terms of energy, tend to be, just more, I don't want to say strict, but a higher level of quality because we live here. And right. So it's important to us to take care of the environment. So that's where a lot of the push comes from, is either we think we can do better, so let us do that, or and just in terms of managing the land and the resources, we think we can do better than the feds.
Is there a point where that collaboration, because you want collaboration between the feds and the states, at the state level, is there a point where that collaboration breaks down? I think this constant battle? That
is the problem. And typically, I mean, we have a really good working relationship with the federal employees here. So our Bureau of Reclamation, our Bureau of Land Management, really good working relationships with them. So you see that collaboration, that coordination more within the state level. It's when it gets removed to the DC level that I think it kind of breaks down. So
is there a party or a group of people that ultimately pay for this constant tension? Is it the taxpayer that suffers the most? Is it business owners? What's your take on who suffers the most in this constant battle?
I would say both, because being able to, as a legislator, being able to appropriate funds to our Attorney General's office, to our, judiciary, to engage in those battles. That's the, funds we have to appropriate that maybe could be used somewhere else.
What's the guiding principle in all that to know who's in control or who should make the decisions? Because obviously these lawsuits are based on who should determine the rights of the local citizens. Is there a guiding principle to determine whose job it is to decide and to govern over a certain issue? Is there a simple test to know is it a federal decision? Is it a municipal decision? Is it a county decision?
Yeah, I don't know. So for me personally, I can't speak for anybody else, but for me personally, it's whatever the decision that is being made should be made by those that the decision impacts the most, right? So for me, at a state level, if it is an issue that we see across the board, so it affects every county, it affects every municipality, every resident, then that's probably something the state, right, should come in and weigh in on. If it's unique to a county or unique to a municipality, then let them work that out. Because that makes sense to me. So at the federal level, I think I tend to look at it the same way. If it is something that affects every state and we need that cohesive throughout every state, because I think it would create chaos if every state just did their own thing and there wasn't that cohesion. So when it comes to those issues, I think the feds absolutely, that's where it needs to live. Much like, with the Roe v. Wade, the feds said this is not something that is, should be decided at a federal level, is not something that is guaranteed in the U.S. Constitution. So let's let each state figure it out,
right?
Which makes sense to me.
But it took us several years to get there.
It did. It did.
Several.
Which is one of the beautiful things I think about government. People get frustrated with the bureaucracy and how long it takes, and I embrace that. It should take a long time because these are big decisions, and so to just wake up one day willy-nilly decide something
right.
that could have some long-term effects for people,
especially when it's polarized, like Roe versus Wade. It took several decades, not just years, but decades to get to this decision.
Yeah.
And the ultimate decision to make it a state level decision is probably, I think, the right decision. But in all of this, we're talking about local control, and local control could be states, it could be county, it could be even school districts, as low as school districts. How do you know? Does the local control depend on the issue? Does it vary from one subject to the next? For me, it does. For me, it absolutely does in terms of how I make those decisions, and where I sit with most proposed legislation. The big test for me, primary, is the oath we took. So I am first and foremost responsible for upholding the Wyoming Constitution, and our Wyoming Constitution is brilliantly crafted. So then from that, first I say, is this constitutional? Is it something we can do? And then from that, who does this affect, and who should have that decision-making authority? So with, for example, the repeal of our gun-free zones, many argued it was a Second Amendment law. I argued it was not. It has nothing to do with the Second Amendment. What it does have to do with is local control and who should be able to decide. And for me, local control means giving the municipalities, the school districts, the counties, the authority, because they ultimately are the ones that we, they are responsible for the public health and well-being of their citizens. So that is their responsibility to ensure that we are safe. They know those situations where maybe it might, pose a threat to our safety. So they should be able to make that call. Right. So for me, and with that legislation, that definitely was a local control. The city of Casper needs to decide for them, what works within their properties. The county, school districts, as we go up, I don't think that's a decision the state should make. Right. I think that is a definition of backing the blue. When we say back the blue, it's not just a Facebook post. It's not just a saying that you support the police officers, but giving them the ability to make those decisions, or at least the governing body of the local police to make those decisions on how we protect our citizens, because they're ultimately responsible. So making those votes, giving them the authority to make those decisions is backing the blue in my opinion. But can't this be subjective? Obviously it's depending on your point of view. It really is. And part of my frustration with this last general session was there was a lot of talk about local control. And I would say the majority of the legislation we passed through strips away that control. So it's either taking it away from municipalities, it's taking it away from counties, it's taking it away from individuals, it's taking it away from school districts. And we even looked at, the executive branch and the judiciary, and as the legislative branch decided we could tell them what to do. So, but it was taking, authority away from those locals, and ultimately saying, the legislature should have all of that authority, and they should be able to decide for you. Thanks for watching today. These podcasts are powered by PayRock, and PayRock is a payment solutions provider. We work with any size business or nonprofit, improving those payment acceptance efficiencies while reducing those overall costs. You can get a hold of me through any one of those social media channels, or you can give me a call. Let's get back to that podcast. Speaking of subjectivity, one of the things you're known for is your opinion pieces that you put on Facebook or on online, wherever that is. Is there a line between what Elissa thinks and what her beliefs and what her who she represents, the constituents, what they believe, and how do you manage that? You obviously have your own personal opinions. You have a business. You're involved. You have certain ideas. What does that line look like between your thoughts and who you're representing?
So for me, and the reason I started posting various things on Facebook was truly just in terms of transparency and getting information out and letting people know, here's what's going on, here's what we're talking about, here's the issue, what do you think? So I rely heavily on getting input from, not only those that I represent in 56, but those that live in Casper and in Trona County and Wyoming. Because ultimately, I don't just represent 56. It's every person who lives in Wyoming, not right now, but 5 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now. So, the more informed I am on how people feel. So I reach out on every issue, to see how constituents feel primarily, and then the city of Casper. So work really closely with our city of Casper and city staff and our city manager, and our county commissioners, to say, how does this impact you? What does this look like? And then how do we do this? And reaching out to industry and reaching out to, all of the experts in the field, because there are so many topics that we're supposed to be knowledgeable about.
Right.
And my thought is, I don't live in that world. I don't know what that looks like. So I rely on the people that do, because that's who this is going to affect. So then I say, hey, what does this look like? How do you feel? And then I vote accordingly. There were a few bills that came through that I personally would have voted in favor for or against, but representing my district, I did not.
You did not.
So,
right.
Because I'm there to be their voice, not just my own.
And that's one of the things I noticed in one of your opinion pieces that you posted several months back, or maybe 3-4 months back, is you specifically said that you asked your constituents their thoughts on a particular bill, and that's what you were conveying, their thoughts. I thought that was very different, because a lot of times you see, especially on a federal level, you see it more often because it's stigmatized. Everyone has their own agenda, whether it's personal, whether it's getting wealthy in a short period of time, or whatever it is. They have a personal agenda, and so they're trying to push their thoughts. And you can hear when you track things online, they're not always representing their constituents. And so that's one thing that I think is important for representatives in Cheyenne, is that they have a they have a pulse on what's happening in here, because you can stay in Cheyenne, and Cheyenne's a different place. It's not Casper either, and Casper's not Cheyenne. So it's important to understand where everyone's coming from.
And that was part of the pushback I got on a few pieces. Being a Republican, I was told, you are not voting in line with the Republican, the Wyoming state platform, which is probably true, because I was voting in line with my constituents.
Right.
And I try to tell people I have one of the most moderate districts. We are very much a get government out, let me do my thing. And some of those don't align necessarily with the Wyoming Republican platform.
Right. So it's pushing libertarianism as long as that makes sense.
Yeah, it's I'm the voice of the people in House District 56, and so even when I'm on the floor and get up to the mic, the arguments, the questions I will ask are not necessarily mine.
Right.
It's what I'm hearing, and the concerns and objections that I'm hearing out of my district, out of Casper, out of Trona County.
So on some issues, you're considered a rhino, because I saw the latest post that you shared.
Oh, I am like one of the proud, yes.
But then other ones, your other issues, you're considered a moderate. So it just depends on the issue. It's all just based on the context.
And some very conservative. So. Especially when it comes to any of our fiscal, and appropriations, I'm probably more conservative than some. It doesn't really matter what I think.
So back to business, how does that constant struggle affect businesses, retaining businesses, attracting businesses? Because it does have an effect on local, the local economy. How do you see that as a business owner?
It absolutely does. And there were actually a couple of bills that It wasn't necessarily the bill or how it was worded that I had issue with. It was the mindset behind it and the narrative that creates for the state of Wyoming. And that was my argument. It's like this, be careful, because this is the mindset, behind it. And this is the narrative that then becomes who we are. And it is detrimental in terms of recruiting businesses to move here, recruiting families to move here, recruiting, even retaining some of our younger people. It speaks very loudly. And so the result, I think the impact, maybe the unintended consequences from some of that legislation, are people are going to be saying, yeah, this isn't somewhere I want to live. This isn't somewhere I want to, bring my employees. And that does cause damage to our businesses. So it's being very mindful of the narrative and the picture we paint of who we are.
Right. And I think that's the common critique that we have against Cheyenne, that they don't represent us. They live in their own little world, very maybe DC focused or whatever focus it is. And so there isn't that representation that we're looking for. But getting into the actual topics, I want to, start by talking about property taxes, because it's been a hot topic the last several months. Before we get into what's happening, give us a background of what's been discussed so far, what's been voted on, where are we at, and because there's a lot of, as you know, there's a lot of misinformation out there on what the property tax potential changes how they could affect us as homeowners, as citizens. So can you give us a background on what's happened so far?
Certainly, and there's a lot. It gets a little convoluted. So with the 67th legislature before me, they passed several pieces because there are different levers, right, that we can affect in terms of property tax and what that looks like. So one of the first things that was implemented was a 4% cap. So what that means is year over year, the increase in property value will not be taxed. I mean, it caps at 4%. So any increase above 4% is exempt. Okay. That's the first thing. It applies to everybody across the board. Then we also initiated the long-term homeowners exemption. So that's for any Wyoming resident over the age of 65 who has paid property taxes for 25 years. Doesn't mean on the same house. Doesn't have to be, 25 years, consistent. You could have 10 years here, you move, you come back, you pay 10 years, you move, you come back, you pay 5 years, whatever. Just have to total 25 years, 65 and older. There's an exemption. Then we also have the veterans exemption. I think we changed that up to 6,000 now. So those three were already in play, 23, 24. So what was interesting from the 2024 season is just the 4% cap resulted in it's like $18.98 million loss, because there was $300 million in property values that were exempt because they were above the 4% cap, right? I think about 45% of that was out of Teton County, right? Surprise. So that was already in play. So one of the challenges we had this last general session, when we were getting flooded with all of these bills, demanding for more reform and more, exemptions, we hadn't really seen how those other ones were going to play out yet and what the effect was going to be on our counties and our cities. So some of us were saying, whoa, just wait. Let's see how this shakes out before we do anything. So then fast forward just a little bit, last year, during part of the campaigning, there were folks literally standing outside of Walmarts all across Wyoming saying, how would you like to pay, 50% less in property taxes? Yes, of course, I would love that. Right. So no other discussion was had. It was just, would you like to pay half?
Right.
Sure. So 30,000 some signatures are secured and then validated by our Secretary of State, which then initiated the People's Initiative, which will be on the ballot in November on the next general. So the people of Wyoming get to decide if they want to permanently cut property taxes in half. So that's out there. We'll see what happens. So knowing that was out there, and so that the rhetoric on the floor was the people have spoken, they're demanding we cut their property taxes in half. And my argument was the people have not spoken. 30,000 people did,
Right.
which is not necessarily
It's not
the
500,
majority.
600,000. No.
Not the majority. So let's slow down just a bit. So there were different bills crafted out of the Senate and the House. And at the end of the day, where we settled is 25% across the board. Well, and I'll step off for a side. This is one of those things that I also struggle with because we are creating a blanket percentage for every county in the state where there was, just crazy variance. Some counties only saw 11% change over however many years. Most of this was the result of, the pandemic and property values going up and all of that. So 25% blanket, what does that look like? So that was what the 68th passed, and that's automatic. So it's not an exemption that people apply for. It's just going to be automatic, and that will be initiated for the 2025 tax season. So that's what's in play right now.
Okay.
And then we also put forward a bill that was passed that just goes through and kind of goes through the order of exemption and how those can be applied for and how they can be applied. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, you could qualify for the long-term homeowner and the veterans, and then also get the 25%.
All the things. So you just stop paying taxes.
Correct.
And with the Cayman Islands.
So, which is interesting because our Joint Revenue Committee met yesterday and today, I think. Yesterday, so June 3rd in the afternoon, they were talking about property taxes and all of the exemptions and what that looks like, and just revenue loss and what that's going to look like and how that's going to shake out with our counties and our cities. And towards the very end, there is a lot of frustration because there's so much to keep track of, and it is so convoluted, and it has just gotten out of control. I would say the legislature, we did that. We made it very complicated. Mm-hmm. So then Senator Bob Ide put forward a motion and requested LSO draft some, language that would, in essence, repeal Article 15 of the Wyoming Constitution and eliminate all property taxes across the board.
Okay.
For minerals, for oil and gas, for natural gas, for coal, for commercial, industrial, residential. We'll just eliminate them across the board, which is an interesting idea. And it will. What that will do then is lead to discussions about, okay, so we're going to remove this revenue stream that pays for all of the services the state provides and the county and the city. And what does that revenue look like? And then how do we fill that space?
Right.
Is it consumption tax? Well, that's not going to work, because not a lot is consumed out of Niobrara County. So how do you do that?
Example, yeah.
Distribution is going to be tricky, right? Because right now, property taxes, one, help fund our public school system, and then two, primarily stay in the county that they're generated. So Natrona County uses, the revenue generated from our property taxes. So if you get rid of those, how do we ensure that cities, counties, and the state all have that revenue? Right. Is it we double our sales tax and go to 8%? Do we initiate a state income tax? What do we do? Because right now, so much of our budget at the state, and then also some at the counties and the cities, comes from the taxes that are our energy industry.
Could we not survive without that tax?
I don't know. If it goes away, it just shifts the burden, right?
Right, for sure, because we still need to function.
We have to pay for these things.
Right.
So we shift the burden from the energy industry to businesses, to individuals, to... Yeah.
So it sounds great. It sounds great in the sense that, if we can reduce our property tax or eliminate property tax, eliminate all of the taxes for businesses, for minerals development, things like that. It sounds great in essence, but it's not. I don't think it is, because the money has to come from someplace else.
Exactly.
So the only alternatives are increased sales tax or income tax, like you mentioned. So is it, in your opinion, is it short-sightedness? On everyone's part, like the constituents that look at this and say, "Yeah, I'll sign for 50% reduction in my property taxes." Is it short-sightedness? Is it short-sightedness from the congressmen that actually put that motion forward, because where else is the income going to come from?
Exactly.
He must assume that we can survive without it. I would imagine.
I think that was part of my frustration in campaigning last summer. The narrative seemed to be government spending is out of control, particularly at the state level, right? So spending is out of control. We need to cut property taxes. I thought that's curious because cutting property taxes doesn't affect the state at all.
Right.
That's not where our revenue comes from. So it's going to really hit, our counties and our cities. So have we had that conversation? And what does that look like? And I think that was part of the disconnect. And that short-sightedness is, yes, property taxes, have gotten out of control because of the valuation and the crisis that the pandemic created. But then I think we added to that crisis, right? So in thinking about, yes, how do we provide relief to homeowners, which absolutely I understand it and we need to do, and how do we balance that with making sure our cities and our counties are our special districts? We have fire districts, weed and pest. We just passed a senior district. Those are all property taxes. So how do we keep our special districts whole? How do we keep our public education system whole? How do we keep our cities and counties whole?
Right.
And that's the tricky balance.
Our the police budget, does that come from property taxes as well?
Yeah, it comes out of the city's general fund. And the general fund, property taxes go directly into the general fund. So speaking with our city manager, I think it's about a 3% decrease. So it's 1.8 million, I think, all said and done, decrease to the general fund. And the general fund in the city is what provides for those essential services. So police, fire, streets, water, wastewater, sewer, bail fill, all of that comes out of the general fund.
Right. So if you listen to the Carter or the city managers in other areas, they're all just saying something. You can find their posts online saying this is a very dangerous crossroads that we're in, because it would drastically change our life here as we know it. And it would either lead us, but like you said, it's potentially catastrophic, but it definitely leads toward another form of tax. And so
it has to.
We pride ourselves in not having an income tax, and we do attract businesses for that as well, so that'll change, because going back to the, on a personal level, is our personal tax position will radically change, but also attracting businesses, because we do attract businesses because we don't have a state tax.
Correct.
So.
And I think one of the things that we lose sight of is we don't carry our fair share. We don't. As an individual, for every dollar I pay in taxes, I receive $14 in services. So there's a $13 gap. Who makes that up? Energy.
Someone has to. Yeah.
Energy does right now. Yeah. So it falls to oil and gas, to mining, to that's who bridges that gap for us. So if we start to reduce or eliminate those taxes, then it's going to shift that burden. And I think people lose sight of, even on the floor in the House, when we were talking about cutting property taxes, a few of us, I think J.D. Williams, good dude, was the first one to say, these aren't property taxes. These are service taxes. This is the revenue that we generate to pay for the services that we depend on. So you want to cut property taxes? Cool. What services are we going to cut?
So ultimately, who should decide this? Who should, whether it's relief measures or whether it's structural reforms, should this be uniformly decided by Cheyenne? Are they all knowing to make those decisions for us in Casper?
I think if it's going to be a significant shift in policy, like eliminating property taxes and shifting that tax burden, I think that definitely has to be a ballot initiative that every resident in Wyoming weighs in on, because it will affect every person in every county. So absolutely. And it's a constitutional amendment, so it's going to take all of us to weigh in on that. And I think part of the challenge I struggled with, especially with the 25%, the 4% cap made sense to me, right? At a state level, that's a policy decision that makes sense. How we target, certain demographics that maybe are feeling it more than others, I think definitely should have been a county decision, because the counties can identify, where do we need that relief more than others? And we're seeing that, how these decisions affect Teton County is very different than how it affects Weston County or Natrona County. Very different from how it affects Campbell County.
Right.
And so some of those hardship counties are struggling because of the decisions we made. So I think it's really finding that balance. How do we as a state set the guide rails, the guardrails, saying here are the parameters we need to work in, and then letting each county and municipality decide what that looks like.
But it takes understanding as well, and with the level of misinformation there is, with the sound bites that we hear and the rhetoric that controls a narrative. It's because I was privy enough to listen to Carter Napier talk about this like a month ago at a business meeting. Not everyone can hear that. Not everyone has access to that information. So how do we get the people that are directly affected, even yourself? How do we get that information that is as most unbiased as possible to the people to make those informed decisions? How does that happen?
Well, I think the good news is we're seeing a shift in people paying attention. I think there were a lot of years that just because of frustration, at the federal level, which I understand, you reach that point of why vote? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what I do. It doesn't affect anything at the federal level, which I would probably agree with, right? We don't have much impact on what happens federally. At a local level, that's a whole different story. I mean, every single vote matters. Every election, whether it's city council or county commission or school board or, your senators and representatives, those are decided within a dozen votes, right? So it's critically important that we pay attention to the local representatives. And I think at this last session, people are starting to pay attention and go, whoa, wait a minute.
Right.
What's going on? I don't think I'm okay with that. So they are paying more attention. I think we hit records this year in the House. We actually had 220,000 people watching.
Right.
Which is unheard of,
that is
right?
A lot, yeah.
So people are paying attention to city council meetings. People are paying attention to county commission meetings and to what's going on at the state. So we're paying attention. So now that we have more people paying attention, how do we get that information out there, right? And it's hitting all of the facets, from social media to, just getting up and talking about it, to actually showing up to meetings and asking questions. Our city staff is absolutely exceptional about answering questions. Yeah, just give us the information. Okay. Yeah, they're really, really good at that, but we have to ask. One of the things I actually floated to Lisa Scroggins with our public library, I said, hey, what would you think about doing a series of workshops, like on a Thursday evening, whatever that might look like, but we do 3 or 4 of them. And the first one is just designated to city. How does the city operate? How does it function? Where does it get its revenue from? What are the services the city provide? It cracks me up when people go to a city council meeting complaining about their property taxes. That's a county issue. Has nothing to do with the city, right?
Right.
Or we'll get upset about the school district and how much money they're spending on tennis courts. City has nothing to do with that,
right.
right? So just understanding city, this is what that looks like, and then doing another one that's just county, and what does that look like, and what are the responsibilities of the county? Where does our revenue come from? And then focusing on the state, and what does that look like? So not only operationally, how do we function? Where do our revenues come from? What services do we provide at all levels? And then how do residents and constituents get engaged?
Right.
How do they participate in that process? Because it really is, as a republic, it is a participation process. And when we don't participate, when we don't share our voice, then decisions are made without our input.
Right.
And that's kind of how we got where we are now.
Those are really good ideas, because I think that lack of knowledge, people perish, as is written. And I think that's very true. I think I think that there's a lot of convolution over taxes in general. And I remember I was speaking to Joanne True a few months back, and she said people are afraid of taxes in general, but we shouldn't be afraid of those local taxes as long as they're done within reason and they're rational, because those affect us locally. But people consider taxes, all coming from DC, and they're not. They're so getting that knowledge and making it available for people to attend these meetings, because it's a great idea. So Elissa, if you're listening, I think it's a great idea.
We'll talk. I'm sure we'll set it up.
So.
Well, and it's frustrating because people will quote Thomas Jefferson, and I can't remember what the quote is, but it's something about, taxation is immoral and an abomination, and, the government shouldn't have the authority. And my question was, within, what was the context that he spoke those words, and to which government was he referring?
Yeah, England.
It was England, right? So it's not that all taxes are bad or that all taxes are, immoral or an abomination. We pay those taxes to then provide the services that we benefit from, right? I don't have to find my own water. I don't have to remove my own waste because I pay taxes. Right. So somebody else will do that, right? So that police will show up, so that fire will show up, so that I have streets to drive on. That's what our taxes pay for. So, taxes aren't a bad thing, but it is on us to be informed and engaged. And the city of Casper has been really good about going through the budget process and asking citizens, here are the services we provide. What's a priority for you? Where do you think your money should go? Which I think is just phenomenal. So at a city, county, and state level, it's being engaged in those conversations and saying, hey, here's what's important to me, and here's where I want my money to go. Yeah, because then we can make those decisions, and actually then what you see happening in your community reflects the money that you've invested. Absolutely.
But participation is key. So I think that attending those city council meetings, or at least watching them, are vitally important. Speaking with the different city council representatives like Cal Gamroth, and it's super important to interact and find out what's going on.
And they are all, so very helpful. So at a city level, at the county, pay attention to what our county commissioners are doing and how they're allocating funds, and then absolutely pay attention to what your representatives are doing. Because that's where all of the allocation and appropriation starts in the House. So it's the representatives.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and we're getting into a budget session. So budgets, we'll go into session February 13th or something. We have 20 days to figure out the state's budget, and we operate at about $10 billion in a biennium, so $5 billion every year. And I don't think people have a really keen understanding of all of the services and programs that the state is required to provide. So start asking questions and be engaged in that conversation.
And get involved, absolutely. So if you look ahead, in your opinion, what is the next battleground issue that you're going to be facing, and then in the next legislative session?
The budget. Absolutely, the budget. And part of our challenge is going to be, this was the first time in 50 years, I believe, the legislature did not pass a supplemental budget.
Okay.
So that's created some challenges. Sure, so we do not have a supplemental budget, and we are going through recalibration this summer. So that's a recalibration of the public education system and identifying, the needs and the cost per child, and are we actually meeting those needs? Taking into consideration the court ruling that said, no, state of Wyoming, you're not. You need to step up and pay more. So it's going to be a pretty hefty discussion, and there seems to be two sides of this equation, especially when we get into some of those more social issues, in terms of some of our demographics, our elderly, our youth, our disabled. Whose responsibility is it? And is it the state government's responsibility to provide for? Or should we leave that up to, the private sector, the nonprofits, the religious organizations? Whose responsibility is it?
Right.
In terms of mental health, our youth, our very aging population, our homelessness. Right. Yeah. Who's responsible for that? And is that something the state should carry? So I think that's going to be where the battleground is, people will say constitutionally, here are the three things that the state's supposed to pay for. We shouldn't pay for anything else. Oh, okay. So
Right.
what does that look like? And who's ultimately whose responsibility is it?
I think people want a libertarian, government because they want a super small government, but I don't know if that's something that's super effective or super even possible in 2025, to shrink the size of the government drastically. Obviously, there's a lot to trim off for sure, and Doge on a federal level was super important, and I think hopefully they don't stop, even though that department is changing with Elon Musk, and I'm not going to get into those politics, but I think it's important that we do shrink to a certain extent because there's a lot of waste that happens. Absolutely, it's undeniable. But I do think that shrinking to a libertarian government is I don't know if that's realistic. I love it. I would love it to be possible, but I'm not sure it is.
Well, and I think what's interesting is, and there's assumptions that people make, right? Federal, seriously lacking in efficiencies. And so absolutely needs, so because federal government is overspending and out of control, and, state is also.
Yeah.
No, that's not the case. I mean, if you look at the state, in terms of number of employees, number of services, the state has been stagnant and has even reduced in number over the last 10, 20 years. I think the city of Casper is the same way. It's like, no, we're still operating where we were 25 years ago.
Right.
We haven't grown government at all. And our spending is very fiscally responsible. So are there some areas? I'm sure. Yeah, there are some things that we could do better, some, redundancies that we could look at. But this out of control spending and lack of efficiency, I don't think applies at the state, for the state of Wyoming or the Natchitoches County or the city of Casper. Really, really good at how we've allocated and spent money. So I'm sure there are things we could do better. I think the big deciding factor is going to be, is that this, the responsibility of the state? Should we have a Department of Health? Should we have a Department of Education? Should we have,
Right. Those are scary ideas, but when you dig into them, there's a lot of logic to it. How efficient are those systems, and what are their purposes? Why were they created, and what are they doing today? So,
and do they still, what was the intent, and are we still doing what we said we were going to do, or have we gotten off into the weeds somewhere?
Right, and I think politics has definitely affected all of that. When you look at the Department of Health, for example, I mean, it's like how much has, over the last decade, how has politics or government affected the Department of Health and their strategies and their implementation of even studies. And so it's like, was this ever a positive thing to have created? And those are scary topics if you don't dig into it and try to understand what's been happening.
Ask the questions.
I want to end on a positive note, on a positive story.
Love it.
You talked to me about a gentleman in Powell that you had come across, and he contacted you, and because of his involvement, do you remember this story? And then there was a positive outcome. Can you give us that story?
Maybe. I'm not sure which.
It's about local engagement, and the idea that this citizen in Powell reached out to you and didn't think the allocation of these specific funds were fair.
Right.
You remember the story?
Yes, I know what you're talking about.
Talk to us now.
So reached out to me, and I've actually had quite a few. I mean, from Park County, from Sheridan County, will reach out to me. I guess I'm not only the rhino, but the responsive, I'll actually call you back, which I love. So reached out, and his position was that local, taxpayer monies should not be used to fund, some of these associations. And this actually became a really large topic of discussion at our corporations committee. Should they? Because our municipalities, I think all 99 of them, pay membership fees to be a part of the Wyoming Association of Municipalities. Our county commissioners are part of the Wyoming County Commissioners Association. There are a lot of associations out there. And so his feeling was, the city of Powell, we don't think our taxpayer dollars should pay for that. So the state needs to eliminate it entirely and prohibit that from happening. What I said to him was, I I don't think that's something the state should
Mm-hmm.
be able to decide. I think that's definitely a local issue. So, if the citizens of Powell are not happy with that, talk to your city council, and city council can say, yeah, we're not going to do that. In the city of Casper, I think we see value in. As a legislator, I'll tell you, I had the city of our little town of Opal, very, very small. I don't even know how many people know about the city of Opal. They had a problem, and it was with federal regulation in terms of how we designate emergency personnel. And our water and wastewater operators were excluded from that. So if there's a natural disaster, if there's a crisis, and we need our water guys on site, they wouldn't be allowed because they're not emergency personnel. So quick, super easy little bill that I ran through, designating them as emergency personnel. So Opal comes to, representative and say, hey, here's a problem. We went to the Wyoming Association of Municipalities and said, hey, would you run this by the other 98 municipalities and see where they're at with this? And they did. And at the end of that conversation, all 99 municipalities said, yeah, this is a problem. We need this fixed. So when this bill then makes its way into committee, on the House side, the Wyoming Association of Municipalities sends 2 people that spoke for all 99 municipalities. We didn't have 99 mayors and city managers and city administrators having to drive to Cheyenne and, say, hey, here's why this is important. We had 2 people that represented all of them. That's why those things matter, right? Because there is strength in numbers. So I think that's one of those issues that needs to be decided. Some will say, absolutely, there's value in that, and some will say, no. I mean, our tax dollars should be used for something else. But I think at a local level, that's where that conversation needs to happen.
Absolutely. In closing, can you give us some final thoughts? What's one thing you'd like to share with Wyoming about getting involved, or something that's important to you in this next cycle?
The biggest thing I have learned being down there this first term is I don't think I understood really how important it is to be informed and to be engaged in the conversation. I took for granted, right, that I knew my rep and would reach out and say, hey, what is this about? As I thought everybody did that. So for me, it is very difficult to do my job down there without that engagement and without folks reaching out and saying, hey, here's what I think about this. So it is critically important. And part of the struggle, I think, with some of the decisions that have been made and the folks that we have representing us, we had less than 27% voter turnout for the primaries. And part of it is that apathy, right? That indifference of I'm just done with all of it, and not understanding how important every vote matters at the local level. So for me, what is important is being informed, being engaged, and voting. I talked to a lot of folks that said, "Oh no, yeah, I'll vote in the general." It's too late.
Yeah,
I mean the decisions made in the primary, and the conversations about bills, right, start now. Don't wait until we're on the floor in February.
Right,
that's too late. So just how important it is to be involved and to be engaged and to ask questions. Otherwise the decisions that affect our cities and our counties and our schools and our state are going to be made by somebody else. And it needs to be our voice.
It's important. That's so true. How can they find you? I know that you have a Facebook page.
I do.
What's your address?
You can it's online. So on Facebook, yes, Representative Elissa Campbell at House District 56. And I try and post, even what's going on with the committees. So that's a great way to reach out. On our WyoLeg website, so WYOLEG.gov, you can find all the representatives. So it has my email address, which is elissa.campbell@wyoleg.gov, or my cell phone number, which is also on there, 307-277-4782. I actually had LSO. They're like, that's your cell phone number. You want that information out there? And I said, well, Yes, because it's my cell phone number.
And you
How else are they going to get a hold of me?
Right. And you'll pick up or you'll call back.
I will. I will call you. I will call back. So I do, especially with emails during session. I kept track, and in 37 days, I received over 3,000 emails, which is a lot. I tried to answer. I got in a pretty good habit of answering about 75 a night, which is tough. Yeah. So my priority is to those out of House District 56. So if you tell me, hey, I'm in House District 56, I'm in Casper, yours is at the top, I will read and, get back to you. Then within Casper and Natrona County, and then outside of Natrona County. But we'll absolutely get back. So reach out and share your thoughts.
Well, thank you for joining us on the podcast. I hope that the podcast helps people understand better what's happening in our community. So thank you again.
Thank you for doing this. This is an important piece of the puzzle, right? You got to ask the questions and get in front of the people to say, hey, what's going on? So thank you.
Right. And call people out.
Yes. Do that.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks.